All right, hello and welcome to the Benzo Rehab Dungeon. It is July 18th, 2021. This is Religious Deconstruction 9. I am here. First off, I am your host, Michael Deebs. Joining me, as always, on these Religious Deconstruction videos is a friend of the show, Jacob. Jacob, how are you doing today?
Beautiful. I'm ready to go in on this stupid fucking Nazi Zoomer.
Yeah, that has a pretty good description of who this kind of person is. So yeah, we wanted to talk today about an article that came out not too long ago. Let's see, July 8th, so 10 days ago. And it's poignant in how specifically kind of evil it is.
Yeah, it's unhinged. It's
Yeah, it is quite unhinged. Um, Also notable is it's being published in the American Conservative, which is a pretty prominent conservative publication.
yeah.
I think just on name alone, they kind of get a viewership out of out of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at their about page right now, and it's interesting. Like they strike me as more of a libertarian bent, but also so like there is this weird kind of like racist dog whistle too. They have three core beliefs, and the third of those is that quote yeah well yeah quote faith, family, tradition, and our Western heritage are endangered by an alliance of big government, big corporations, and nasty cultural revolutionaries who display contempt for our past and who would tyrannize our present and future. So we defend religious liberties. Which, I mean, frankly, almost under certain definitions of fascism, I feel, or well, maybe not fascism, but they move towards a like third positionist kind of thing there, which is crypto something.
Yeah.
I'm not going to necessarily call it crypto fascism, but it ain't good.
It ain't good.
Doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies. I will say that.
Yeah, there's so many like dog whistle concerning language
Yeah,
points in there, like our
right,
past, our
right.
traditions, our values, and stuff like that.
And there, I
Stuff
mean,
that could be
they're
pulled directly from like Mein Kampf, probably.
right. Yeah. Well, in their opposition to big corporations, as they explain in their second point, is that they talk about quote crony capitalism, monopolies, and special favors for the politically connected. So uh well, and then they have a nice
I
little
mean,
bit
wasn't
about
that something that had to do with like the National Socialism of Germany?
right.
Like,
Well, it's yeah, I mean, I think it's yeah, they strike me as hyper libertarian, like that, free association is thwarted by uh, monopolization of the economy and like cartelization of the
yeah.
economy, which like fair, like that's not an incorrect point, but also like the solution isn't this
Well,
weird fucking y'all Qaeda kind of
yeah.
whatever. But anyways,
Yeah, no, that's
uh,
an important thing to note is that oftentimes, groups like this are correct in identifying an issue, and then their proposed like methodology to fix it is
right.
like
Well,
we
and especially I mean, especially because it's just rooted in this sort of I mean, it almost reminds me of, like when Southerners talk about the lost cause and
Hmm.
the Civil Wars, the War of Northern Aggression, and that, the South
Yeah,
will rise again. This kind of thing of, that there's this noble, idyllic, golden age in the past, and that, you know, and it also, I mean, it also sort of constructs social and political life as necessarily antagonistic, and and as sort of a martial endeavor, because they're culture warriors,
yeah,
you know, in as much, or their disdain for political correctness notwithstanding, they themselves are also culture warriors just as much as so-called social justice warriors might
for
be.
sure, absolutely. Very kind of reactionary sort of stuff. So,
Yeah.
um, this article, which was written by a literal demon person named Declan,
Yes.
um, is the headline is the meaning of the native graves, and this is in reference to the mass graves that were found outside of the residential schools of Canada. Um,
And the subtitle, it's worth noting, is
yes,
literally, and I quote,
yes.
"They're good, actually."
Typical,
So,
like, yeah. Um, so yeah, so a brief overview of the residential schools for those who are unaware is the residential schools where usually Christian run, usually Catholic run, more specifically, schools that would take in Native children. These children were often forcibly removed from their parents, and the goal of these residential schools was to nativize the next generation of Native Americans. So my partner is actually Native American as well as myself. Her grandmother was a product of one of the residential schools, and it's worth noting that these residential schools were running all the way up until like the early 90s. So not
it's chilling. It's honestly chilling to think about
Yeah, no,
that.
and it's such a recent part of history, and we can point the finger at Canada and be like, oh, that's a horrible thing, Canada, but this is something that happened in America as well, with a very similar timeline, and the disenfranchisement of Native American people here in America is still prominent and active. But these residential schools, we're basically trying to train the next generation of Native Americans to be denativized, to be more European in their beliefs and their social structures. So my partner's grandmother is a product of this. And despite the fact that they very clearly have Native American ancestry, she vehemently denies it. When her grandmother found out that I was Native American, she said a couple of like low key racist things about Native Americans in front of me. I was like, thank you so much.
Hmm.
but it's disturbing how this person's and she's a nutcase, which
Hmm.
partially may just be because she's crazy on her own, but it can't have helped that she had her more formative years in this residential school system, uh
Yeah.
de-learning like her family's traditions, and also being forced um to really just hate the self, to
Yeah. I would almost have to imagine that it's sort of similar to an environment that produces people with like a cluster B personality
she is
disorder.
absolutely like that.
Um, just
Yeah,
that really problematic relation to this, in the proper sense of the word problematic, that it's a problem, that it's an issue, that there's a contentious relation to the self,
yeah,
because you're getting, I mean, not only is it a lack of positive reinforcement, but also the enforcement you're getting is so um unmoored or rudderless, that it's topsy-turvy. You have no
Yeah,
um
it's an obliteration of the self to deny like what your identity is as a person, sort of, you know.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, and also, I mean, part of what's interesting too is, you know, I don't want to paint with a broad brush, and I'm speaking only from like some pretty meager readings on the Comanche and the Lakota. But what's interesting about indigenous kinship is that acculturation is possible through through fictive kinship, through comportment and behavior and observing mores and all this stuff. And there, as far as I know, there is not this sort of aside from that, there's this racial thing of you are XYZ, which is kind of, that's the rub of these schools, is that there is this compulsory acculturation,
yeah,
but you, were you to be remanded to one of these institutions, you're still going to walk out with brown skin,
uh,
you know?
absolutely. Yeah.
So it is kind of, it's a question of, it's a question of making, literally just making the savage more palatable. It's not de-savaging this person,
No.
because that person is still maintained as the figure of the savage.
Yeah, and you know, it's notable that this is a statistic I bring up kind of often. Um, Actually, I don't know the statistic offhand, but the relationship between Native American people and the police is
Mm,
worse in America than it is for Black people. Um,
sure.
like obviously a much smaller group of people because of the couple hundred years of genocide against the Native Americans.
Right.
But yeah, the like the rate of violent police interactions between Native Americans and the police. I don't know what it is in Canada necessarily, but I do know that Canadian police used to like basically arrest Native Americans, drive them out into the middle of the wilderness during winter, and make them walk
Just leave
back home.
them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just leave them. Um, with no direction or anything like that, usually not dressed for the weather or anything, sometimes
Right.
taking their shoes. And yeah, they would just let them freeze to death out there. I
Yeah.
imagine
When I,
that the statistic is similar in Canada. Canada is actually very similar to America in a lot of ways that
yeah.
Canadians don't like to admit.
Well, no, I mean, also a couple years ago, I actually went. I went on a fishing trip to Canada with my dad and my brother, and we stayed with um, someone my dad knew who was a Canadian. And this man, well, so this guy is sort of a, he's an interesting guy. He's sort of a Teddy Roosevelt kind of figure, I would say, in terms of
Sure.
like this outdoorsman kind of guy. But you know, the the flippancy of his racism towards the natives, it wasn't active disdain. It wasn't um these people are an affront to me. It was literally just like,
Yeah, it's a
it's the way,
casual.
yeah,
It's
it's
normal
almost,
to the to
yeah, and it's almost the way that people might get frustrated with like noisy kids on the street if you're trying to like get some peace and quiet.
yeah,
It's like this paternalistic irritation of like, ugh, you know.
yeah, right.
But
No,
which
no,
isn't to say that there isn't an active disdain. There absolutely is. But this guy, it was so,
well, in some ways that's kind of worse because it's been so normalized that it's being
right.
treated like, you know, like a mosquito sort of
Uh-huh.
thing, that like I don't care if I crush a mosquito, you know. Um,
Right.
all I feel for it is just a kind of baseline of disdain, and I don't care what happens to it.
Yeah.
And that's oftentimes how
Right. Well, and there's
Americans
also,
and Canadians treat
Yeah.
Native Americans.
When there's the shared belief too between Americans and Canadians, and also in reference to indigenous populations and Black Americans of, well, God, this was centuries ago,
Yeah, right.
like when are you gonna? And it's like, I, I mean, I've spent um, a couple weeks on in the Navajo Nation reservation, and I mean, you know, it's easy to drive through the inner city in any major American city or in any small town and see poverty, but
Oh
it
no,
is truly,
the Native
it
American
is
poverty is
it's
distinct.
like, no, it's like, I mean, it's comparable to me to like what I've seen of like favelas or something like that.
Hmm.
I mean, it's unconscionable. I think to a certain degree, um some populations still sort of maintain like kind of traditional life ways, but still it's in these artificially bounded territories that they might not have anything to do with, other than,
Yeah.
in the 19th century, the United States government said, you're going to march your ass over there or we're going
Yeah.
to fucking
Here's
kill
this
you.
shitty plot of land that we don't
Yeah.
care about, and
Right.
now you get to
Yeah.
live.
Get stepping. Yep.
Yep.
Um,
So back to the article,
the
which
article,
we
right?
should cover at some point.
Yeah.
So Declan Leary, the headline is the meaning of the native graves. The subtext is they're good actually. Um, we covered what the residential schools are.
Yep.
So he has this weird, and this is kind of like the weird like sicko neo, I want to say like neoconservatism, like the Nick Fuentes like kind of
Hmm.
conservatism where they try to like make some um academic argument or something like that, and they like,
It's the posture of being profound. These people want so
yes,
badly to
absolutely,
be deep.
yeah,
I'm assuming in reference to the Bible quote. I'm
yep.
assuming is what you're
So
talking
so
about,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
there's the the Bible quote, and it's being used in an abstract sense here. So like you said, they can be profound with it. And so the Bible quote is from Luke 9:51 to 62, and it came to pass when the days of his assumption were accomplishing that he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers before his face, and going they entered into a city of the Samaritans to prepare for him, and they received him not, because his face was of one going to Jerusalem. And when his disciples, James and John, had seen this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? And turning, he rebuked them, saying, You know not of what spirit you are. The Son of Man came not to destroy souls, but to save. And they went into another town. And it came to pass, as they walked in the way, that a certain man said to him, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. Jesus said to him, The foxes have holes, the birds of the air nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. But he said to another, Follow me. And he said, Lord, suffer me first to go to bury my father. And Jesus said to him, Let the dead bury their dead, but go thou and preach the kingdom of God. And another said, I will follow thee, Lord, but let me first take my leave of them that are at my house. And Jesus said to him, No man putting his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. So that passage is one of the more uh, word I'm looking
Pretty
for.
fire and brimstone-y,
Very
honestly,
fire and brimstone. It's telling that he's also
for a
using the
gospel.
King James
Yeah.
translation, like,
Right.
uh,
Well, so
which
I
which is
mean,
why I tripped up, because it's like written like fucking alien speak in some places.
right. So to me, there's a couple things to note. In the second, I guess, the second paragraph, um, the first line, the Son of Man came not to destroy souls, but to save.
Yes.
Um, what that essentially, for the purpose of this article and for the purpose of the argument he's making, what that essentially is saying, or the work it's doing here, is to say that whatever action is undertaken under the banner of the church or in the name of Christ or God is necessarily ameliorative,
Hmm.
that destruction is incidental and not of God, but of something. It's either mundane or satanic or something.
Well, and that's reinforced in the final portion where it says, "No man putting his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God." Um, just the simple act of like maybe having some kind of self-reflection, or maybe having some kind of attachment to the world in such a way
Right.
that you hesitate in some way, makes you unfit for this mission.
Well, and also, I mean that, but additionally, what that set of verses is saying as well is, um, let me first take my leave of them that are at my house, and
Yeah.
there's the rebuke, and the rebuke is simply to say, no, you must go forth
Yeah.
and evangelize and proselytize. And the point of this is literally that, rather than shore up and do good works within the existing kingdom, the kingdom must grow for growth's sake. And of course, then there's already, and there's this justification of, well, you know it's divinely ordained,
Hmm.
it's necessarily good,
Yeah.
it's sanctioned by God himself.
Yeah.
um
So that seems to be like the real supporting biblical doctrine that he's leaning into in this. Um, and then he goes into uh, you know, Anno Domini 1625, the young French Jesuit Jean de Brebeuf was sent by his superiors to the province of New France, leaving behind the country of his birth. The missionary priest became one of the daring few who ventured into an untamed continent, bearing little
right.
more than a keen awareness of the gravity of their mission to bring the Christian gospel to the natives. Um,
Well, and then he goes through, I mean, what's really interesting to me is is the account of the what is it, the feast of
yeah,
I can't
no,
remember
no,
what he
no.
calls it.
We
But
can
but the
go ahead.
I'm well, I'm skipping a little bit ahead, but like what's, the point for his argument of that, he's trying to, it's literally like what he's doing by including that is to say, look, they had mass graves too. They were putting people in mass graves.
Yeah.
So in my reading of his argument in that, it's like, well, look what they were fucking doing almost, and it's like, that's not the take, man. Like that.
Well, and it's
That's
also
what.
like, there's regular burial that happens, and this is part of
Mhm.
the argument that he uses is like, aren't all like grave sites mass graves? And it's like, well, yes, we have graveyards, sure, but the
Yeah.
context is different when the person that's in the grave is, a child, b, ripped from their family's arms,
Right.
and c, being indoctrinated by an invading force of psychopaths, right? Like,
Right.
you can't just say, well, I mean, all graves are mass graves. Well, yeah, like
Yeah.
most graves don't have a bunch of kids in them from you intentionally trying to, you know, sanitize them in some way from something that's like a part of their being, really, and killing them
Right.
in the process. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
he was invited to witness the sacred Wyandotte Feast of the Dead and the ceremony held at the Wyandotte capital of Asasane. The Wyandotte dead were disinterred, reverently cleaned, and placed together in a communal ossuary pit, along with valuable and meaningful material offerings. So, um, The Christian priest was greatly impressed by the pagans' treatment of their dead, and it is perhaps not coincidence that this was the year of Brebeuf's great missionary successes. So he's setting up this argument that because the Native Americans had this tradition of kind of collecting all their dead and reverently cleaning them, and then placing them like together in graves, that they also believed in mass graves. So what's the problem
Right.
there?
Well, but it's
So
also like he
yeah.
tells on himself a little bit though, because he says they reverently cleaned the remains. It's like, you think the fucking church was reverently
No, dude,
dealing with
they
the
were just shoving
remains?
bodies in the fucking
Yeah,
shallow graves.
yeah. Maybe if they were lucky, they'd probably get like a linen shroud or a pine box or something, you know.
Yeah,
Although I kind of doubt. I don't. I mean, I've
probably.
never seen,
Yeah.
but I kind of doubt it. I mean, you
Um.
know.
So he goes on a little bit more and talks about like some early Christian like uh burials and stuff like that, and relating them to like fuck, what's that shit that's under Rome? No, not under Rome, under France. The
Oh,
fucking
the
catacombs. Yeah,
catacombs.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So he relates it in that way.
Well, then of course there's this really spectacular account of the martyrdom of Brebeuf and Lalemant, uh, and
Yeah,
the brutality with which they were killed.
right. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, that's kind of what's always so laughable to me when reading, anthropological accounts of non-Western violence and the supposed. I mean, the way with which we conduct ourselves violently is so sanitized
Hmm.
and sterile. Like, violence is nasty, it's dirty,
Of
it's
course.
messy. Like, this is, but in the notion that there's some sort of like qualitative difference between what these people
Well,
are
it's because
doing
they
versus.
bureaucratize the violence, and so that makes it
Right.
better, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's legal, it's all
Yeah.
there's all sorts of, there's centuries of jurisprudence about why this is fine.
Yeah.
um
So yeah, I'll read the passage about the yeah
Martyrdom.
martyrdom. Yeah. The Brebeuf and his Jesuits ministered to the Wyandot another 13 years. Then, under military pressure from the northward moving Iroquois, the Wyandot and their Jesuit companions found themselves in dire straits. Finally, as the invading Iroquois sacked the mission village of St. Louis, Brebeuf and fellow priest Gabriel Lalemant were taken captive. The savage torture to which they were subjected included flaying and mockery of the sacrament that they had brought to the Wyandot, a baptism in boiling water. At the end of it all, the natives consumed Father Brebeuf's blood and heart, which probably made up.
Yeah, I don't.
Metal as
Yeah, I
fuck if
don't.
they did, and probably not true anyways.
Yeah. um which, I mean, there's really just like that is so immaterial to this guy's argument.
Yeah, no. Well,
If other than the reason it's material is because it justifies the enrollment in these
yes,
schools.
right.
Because otherwise this whole historical interlude all of it is immaterial. It has nothing to do with what's nominally the object of his argument in his article, which is um, centuries of Anglo mistreatment of the indigenous population under the guise of you know uh, bringing them into the Christian fold.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
So then, the martyrs' bodies were retrieved and buried at the nearby mission of Sainte Marie among the Hurons, where they administered 3 months to the day after the priest martyrdom at the hands of the Iroquois, the remaining missionaries were forced to evacuate. Rather than leave the church to be desecrated, the Jesuits set the mission ablaze and watched their life's work crumble as they.
This
So
is my
sad.
favorite part.
Yeah. It would not
The
be the
next
last church
sentences.
burned in the land whose heavenly patron is now Saint John Brebeuf. In recent weeks, 9 Canadian churches, both Catholic and Anglican, have been subjected to arson attacks. Many more have been otherwise vandalized to varying degrees. The popular narrative broadcast by an astonishingly credulous media is that previously unknown mass graves of children were discovered just this summer on the grounds of Indian residential schools, and in a rash of grief and righteous anger, indigenous protesters swept across the nation desecrating churches. That's actually exactly what happened, but he seems to not
Sounding,
lend that
sounding,
narrative
sounding,
weight.
sounding, sounding very credulous there, bro.
Mm-hmm. So he continues, it is very important to note that the entire story is made up. First, we have always known that many children died in the residential schools.
Yeah. Hey, it's fine, guys.
Yeah.
We always knew about this.
Look. If
Yeah.
if the Germans simply just recognized that, like, the concentration camps killed a lot of Jews, it would have been fine, because at least they know about it and at least they're acknowledging the truth of it, right? That's the argument he's essentially making, is that, look, we always knew that lots of kids died in these schools. Which were active through the 19th and 20th centuries. He seems to be leaving out the 21st century, which they were also active in, but who's keeping track? Child mortality was relatively high during that period to begin with. Indian mortality overall was astronomically high. Would you like to hazard a guess why Indian mortality was high at the time?
Yeah. Huh.
Was it all of the diseases brought over from the old world, quote unquote old
maybe.
world, and all the massacres that the new colonizers were committing against the indigenous population? And the church-run schools for Native children were systemically underfunded by the government. This is the real hazard, I'm sure, resulting in subpar facilities and inadequate medical care. Second, the sites almost certainly include the mass graves of Christian adults from the neighboring communities, as Chief Cadmus Delorme of the Cowessess First Nation admitted with respect to Murrayville Indian Residential School, where an estimated 751 burials were detected by radar last month. The mass graves of public hysteria are, in fact, the ordered and intentional burial sites of people we always knew were dead and who died more or less of natural causes.
Hey, listen, you fucking woke piece of shit. I meant to kill him.
Yeah, right?
I meant to put that pile of bodies there, you fuck.
Right.
Like, what, dude?
Yeah, that's an insane line of reasoning. And I like how he gives himself that out, like, and who died more or less of natural causes. Like, what is the more or less there, like, calculation?
Right, yeah, it's one or the other, buddy. Like, there's not like, you're not gonna walk down to a coroner's office and see a report that says he died of more or less natural causes.
Right,
like, what?
Well,
in what
it's like
fucking
I
universe?
use this at work all the time when I'm, like, not sure what's going on with a project. And I'm like, it's more or less on track, like, because I have no fucking clue, like, where it's actually at, and I'm, like, trying to give an answer to somebody who, like, is my manager. Yeah, it's more or less on track, and that gives me the out to say, like, hey, if it happens sooner than we thought, great. If it happens later than we thought, I gave you the warning. And so yeah, this casual, like, more or less natural causes. If you really think about it, lead comes from the ground and therefore is natural. And
right,
when we put
smallpox is natural.
Yeah.
Like, and then the snide clincher right after. In more literate times, we might have called that a cemetery. Like, what a sanctimonious fuck. Like what a little sanctimonious lick spittle boot. Like this kid is, and I say kid, like he's literally a kid,
Yes, he is
and
quite young.
he's so he is so snowed and evil, and just like willfully in line in lockstep with. But the thing is, this isn't even like mainline. This was not a mainline Catholic attitude, like this kid, I think in most um parishes would be viewed as like kind of a he'd be viewed with some side eye. But I think it's
So
part and parcel of like the state of conservative media these days. These guys are just it's got to be clicks.
so I will agree with you that this is probably not prominent Catholic belief. He's not Catholic himself, and it's notable that he's
Oh,
not
he's
Catholic.
not.
He's not Catholic. He
Oh,
he's
okay.
uh he's a Protestant. I guess I would
Okay.
say.
Probably
Um,
Anglican, I guess.
yeah, and so the it's telling that he's making this defense of the Catholic Church when his entire uh religion is premised off of resisting the Catholic Church and finding a new
Right.
Christianity. Um,
Hmm.
so that's telling because he's making a defense of the Catholic Church in light of this atrocity. So he believes that this atrocity is good, genuinely, I think.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing that's important with all that, and why he's able to make this defense where most Catholics are like, I know some people who are Catholic, and I haven't mentioned this to them, but
Hmm.
like none of them are talking about it. This is not something that's like popular in Catholic discussion right now, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, which the Catholic Church is really really good at, just like being quiet about horrible things it's done. Um, that almost seems like the entire intent of like the structure of the Catholic Church is just like, yeah, some of the priests fuck kids and we don't talk about it.
Right.
Some of the kids in
Yeah.
residential
It's
schools died under suspicious circumstances and we don't talk about it.
yeah. It's just the institution is so powerful. Like
Yeah,
the
it's
institution,
powerful and it's practiced how to just avoid this kind of
right?
criticism
Well,
of
and
itself.
it's adept at exercising power, at that
Yeah,
kind of power necessary to um just uh, completely obfuscate and like make it not even a question.
yeah.
Like it's not a you- it's because I was even talking with so in my parents' neighborhood, um, this was in Cincinnati. I don't fucking care. I'll put shit on blast. In Cincinnati, there was an organization called the Legionaries of Christ that were trying to put in a monastery um, near where my parents live, and there was a community meeting about this, and part of the outrage was because the founder of this and it's a monastic order, it's not like a sect or anything,
Yeah,
it's like Opus Dei or the Franciscans or
sure.
whatever. This dude had molested like 60 kids, and then also had children of his own who he also molested.
Oh, fucking
um,
guy.
and still in this organization is not sanctioned, or I mean has not faced sanctions by the church. They have an ambassador to the Holy See. Like they're fully they're fully within the fold of Catholic propriety. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, no, and
I
that's
don't know why I brought that up. But
well, no, I think that's interesting because
the reason I brought it up is the fact that so my dad is a fairly devout Catholic, but no amount of kitty diddling or kid murder will convince some people that an institution itself is corroded, is corrupt, is evil. which the Catholic Church, the Vatican, absolutely is.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about that too is it's not just that these things happen under this system or this institution. It's also that it happens and that there's no repercussions
Mm-hmm.
for any of these people. And the only time any of these people see any kind of repercussions is when whatever nation or state that they're in decides to prosecute them for, you know, crimes that were committed. Um, but yeah, no, this is a, and I think it derives from, you know, the Christian forgiveness, and I think forgiveness is a good thing in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, there is a point where forgiveness is not something you should give. And when it comes
Right.
to, you know, these residential schools, the Catholic Church should never be forgiven for this,
No.
especially as it like continues to uh obscure what, you know, they did, while they continue to do other bad things much in the same vein as this, when they refuse to take, you know, like actual accountability, provide some kind of reparations, or anything like that for what they've done. um yeah, no, it this
Well,
this forgiveness of itself that's built into to
right. Well, and to stay with the institution itself, I mean, part of what's so disgusting about his argument is he goes on at one point to say, yeah, here we go. He goes on to say that if anyone is at fault here, and the residential school system, for all the good of its evangelizing purpose, was hardly without flaws. That's nice. That's a nice little
right.
acknowledgement. It
Right, I
is
found it.
uh, the responsibility is, without a doubt, with the secular authority. Had the
Yes.
Canadian government, which in word endorsed the Christian mission of the residential schools, upheld that word in deed by providing the funding which church authorities repeatedly said was necessary for adequate operation, living conditions could have been improved and a great many premature deaths avoided. So, you know, like,
God,
so
that
so
fucking makes me, yeah. Go ahead.
what's really wild about that is that proposition does a lot of work for his argument, because one, it's completely ignoring the absolute, just unimaginable wealth, incalculable wealth of the Roman Catholic Church.
Yes.
But then also it allows him to make this contemporary, you know, libertarian paleo neocon point of government bad.
Yep.
And it's like, well, you know, and there is
What's also like ironic about that is he's saying government bad because government didn't do what it was supposed to, but he's anti-government, right?
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, yeah, it's like the only time he's in favor of the government is if it would retroactively get a religious institution off the hook for genocide,
Yep.
which is like, but I mean,
And
yeah,
and you know, I want to
it's
read
incoherent.
the lead into to that thing that you just read.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
goes
yeah.
straight from, you know,
Oh, dude, this is so fucking
so
sickening.
people
Yeah,
die, and when they die you put them in the ground. There is nothing inherently scandalous about this. When the burial site of the 1636 Feast of the Dead was excavated in 1947, the only outrage, justified mind you, was directed at those who uncovered it, and in so doing disturbed and desecrated the sacred resting ground. So that burial site that was uncovered was part of the cultural traditions of this group of people, their self-determined way of handling the dead. He talked earlier about how they reverently handled these bodies and buried them together, uh, etc. This is part of their cultural tradition. It's done with respect, it's done with dignity. These aren't people who they intentionally killed, these are their cherished family members,
right.
etc. You can't compare that to a mass grave from a genocidal mission. That is completely fucking different. Like, hey,
Yeah.
look, I know that we lined up all these people at the killing fields in Burma, and we shot them and kicked their bodies into the mass grave and dumped lime on them. That's part of our tradition. No,
Yeah.
that is completely fucking different. There's a difference between
It's
murder and like
hey
reverent
man,
handling of bodies.
hey man, genocide is heritage, not hate.
Jesus fucking Christ. I almost feel like if you got him drunk, well, he probably doesn't drink. He's probably a fucking nerd.
A
Um,
teetotaler, yeah.
yeah.
You know what I was thinking you should call this episode?
What?
Because I was sick sense of humor. Uh, you should call it make graves mass again.
All right. I like it, the double entendre with mass.
Like a
Yeah, yeah.
right, yeah. It's also like I'm going for like a MAGA kind of thing, you know.
No, I get it.
But
Yeah.
anyways, yeah.
There's a
Well, and
lot
then
of work happening there.
yeah. Well, and then so what's wild too about after that people die remark is he goes on to say,
This is not to discount the deaths of children
yeah,
altogether. Of course, it would have
and
been
then
better if each and every one of the First Nations tykes, Christianized by the union of church and state, had lived a long and happy life.
it's so fucking flippant.
Yeah.
Like to refer one, whoever says the word tykes, and then you're
People who
talking
are trying to
about children.
trivialize something.
Yeah. And then you're talking about children who were literally murdered by the Canadian state and the Roman Catholic Church. Like, get get fucked, dude.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
it's so disgusting. The
It's
just the utter
condescending. It's
disregard.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
condescending. It's like flippant about everything. It's that I think they go by gender neutral pronouns, but that person early on in the election that was like, do I want to vote for Joe Biden? No, but I
Mhm.
don't want to vote for the fascist. Buddy
Mhm.
champ, like Tyke could have been thrown in there as they're condescending
Right.
to people. And it's the
Yeah.
same sort of like, uh, yeah, just condescension and de denying the importance of this by like, hey, they're just little tykes, whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It only counts as half a genocide because they're
Yep.
short
Um,
and
the
young.
the next line is also, after the stuff about the secular authority failing,
Right.
um, but this failure of the secular authority to sufficiently serve the church does not in any way indict that Christian mission. Um,
That's convenient.
yeah. First off, the secular authority, you're already admitting like in that line that the authority has nothing to do with the church, so the church does not need to be served by the secular authority in any way. That's the entire point of the secular authority, is that it doesn't
Right.
serve the church. Uh, you can talk about like how many um, ways the secular authority serves the church by giving them tax breaks, whatever. But the point of the secular authority is not to serve the church. The secular authority is a secular authority because it's divorced from the church. It is an authority that has no religious and dubious to say that, but the idea is that
Right.
the secular authority isn't a part of the church, doesn't take orders from the church, doesn't have to serve the church,
Right.
etc. Um, and make no mistake, the resident schools were first and foremost Christian. Those who ministered to the Indians a century ago did so, like Jean de Brebeuf 3 centuries before, out of a sincere concern for the salvation of their souls. The political utility recognized by the Canadian government that, as one bureaucrat put it early on, the North American Indian cannot be civilized or preserved in a state of civilization, including habits of industry and sobriety, except in connection with, if not by the influence of, not only religious instruction and sentiment, but of religious feelings. Uh, so, recognizing that what the government was trying to do was, you know, like I said earlier, trying to make the Native American people into Europeans. Um,
Right.
by enforcing cultures that have a background in Christianity. So he goes on and he talks about the ossuary, the Osasane ossuary, where again the Native American people, per their cultures and their traditions, and their reverence for their cherished family members who had passed on. So he says, whatever good was present at the Osasane ossuary, uh, where those who had not yet encountered the fullness of truth, which he's talking about the Bible there, or Christianity, the fullness of truth honored their dead as best they knew how, is increased 1,000-fold in the cemeteries of the residential schools where baptized Christians were given Christian burials. Whatever natural good was present in the piety and community of the pagan past is an infinitesimal fraction of the grace rendered unto those pagans' descendants who have been received into the Church of Christ. Whatever sacrifices were exacted in pursuit of that grace, the suffocation of a noble pagan culture, an increase in disease and bodily death due to government negligence, even the sundering of natural families is worth it. Yeah, we lost Jacob for a second. There
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I just read through, so. But basically, the passage that I read of his little fucking screed is
Yeah. Are we still going? We're
yeah,
on.
yeah, no, we're still
Okay.
on. Yeah, don't
I'm
don't
such a
don't say
professional broadcaster.
it's all good, man.
I'm so good at this. All right.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I read through the part where he says, you know,
Whatever good.
yeah, the pagan
Yeah.
culture, yeah, they were honorable to their dead, but it's 1,000 times better that these children were buried as Christians. Um,
Right.
no matter how they died, it's still better, and anything that's done in the pursuit of the salvation of their souls is justifiable. Um, holy shit! First
Right.
off,
Literally. Yeah. I mean, like that. That's the one that's the paragraph I think I screenshotted to you when I was rereading this just to get
yeah,
ready. I was like, what in the fuck? Like,
yep,
I mean, because well, in the closer, I mean, it's fucking insane. It
yeah,
must be so killing these kids to use my own language, killing these kids, begin quote, is worth it. Paragraph break, it must be, else two millennia of Christian civilization in which oceans have been bridged, wars waged, continents conquered, and the lives of a million John Brebeufs given service to the Lord's final commandment, blah, 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 would have been for naught. So it literally is saying, you know, damn, I hope I'm right that God wants
right,
us to kill
yeah.
kids.
It's like, hey, if it turns out that killing these kids was the wrong thing to do, then man, we've really invalidated 2 centuries of killing
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, I just, well, and then so I don't know that I read the closing verse or yeah, verses, not as your fathers did eat manna and are dead. He that eateth this bread shall live forever. These things he said, teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum. Many, therefore, of his disciples, hearing it, said, this saying is hard, and who can hear it? But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples murmured at this, said to them, doth this scandalize you? If then you shall see the Son of Man ascend up to where he was before, it is the spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. So again, like you said, better that they be buried a Christian than live a savage
Yes.
or live a pagan. It's literally it, but I guess like it's just yeah. I mean, I'm just lost for words. Like the argument is so fucking disgusting. It's even more disgusting that it's literally a Zoomer writing this.
Yeah.
I mean, oof. Yeah, I just this kid's fucking sick, really sick in the head. That's literally
Yeah,
that's kind of my take.
um, I believe in rehabilitation for most people, but
Yeah, yeah.
I think we may have reached a point with this particular individual that exceeds rehabilitation.
Yeah, I mean, I just
I've brought up the picture of him. So his name is Declan Leary. His
yeah.
his title says associate editor, but I think demon lizard person is actually what.
Yeah, right, yeah. Um, yeah, like, sniveling
Yeah.
psychopath.
Right.
I like
Yeah.
alliteration, so that's kind of where I'm leaning towards.
Yeah. No. It's just so. Uh. Yeah. It kind of defies description how he's worked himself into justifying genocide as long as it has this religious element to it.
Mhm.
Like that's yeah. It's like I said, he's a fucking demon lizard person. There's no
Yeah,
way that like a regular human just has these fucking thoughts. Like this is something
right,
that comes from hell, if there is a hell, or just the dark void of Cthulian
right.
expanse, if there
Well,
is no hell.
in really the most charitable, reading of this would be that, there is a kernel of true belief in the article. He just decided to amp up the rhetoric for clicks, but even then that's not a mitigating point. Like, the argument is disgusting. um being a clout chaser like that is disgusting.
Sure, but
uh,
I don't think
you
that this
know
is necessarily like. I mean, yeah, yeah, some of it's probably amped up a little bit to clout chase, but I think
mm,
the foundation of where he's coming from is genuine, is really like
yeah,
the
no,
sick part of
absolutely.
it. And I think I talked about this before and with you before we started this episode, but I think this is a more prominent belief than a lot of evangelicals would like to admit, because
Hmm.
this was something that was taught in the church I grew up in, was sort of similar rhetoric that you know we're here to save souls, and anything that's done in pursuit of that is good. And also we're you have this idea of the eternal, and the eternal is what
Hmm.
really matters, right? And you could sort of make that argument in like a secular sort of sense, where like, yes, the long-term goals of humanity are more important than like your one brief life sort of thing. But that's not the way that they're doing this. The way that they're
Mm-mm.
doing this is by saying, hey, you're gonna go to heaven, and that's where your actual life is. This life that you're currently in is all about you performing, being tested by God. And some of these tests are going to be hard, and they're going to make you question things, but you need to push through those questions. No
Yeah,
fit, or no man who turns back when he puts his hand to the plow is fit for the kingdom of God, sort of stuff. Because this temporary, and so it like automatically kind of justifies
right.
atrocious, you know aberrant, horrible things, because you don't care about the current living experience. You're looking to something greater, and it's not in the service of making humanity better over time or anything like that. It's in service of preserving the eternal soul, and whatever destruction and misery you sow along the way is justified because of the end, the ends justifying the means.
Yeah. um yeah. Yeah, I mean, that literally is it. It's a question of the ends justify the means. It's, you know there's divine, uh, the notion that any action undertaken in the name of God is inherently justified,
Hmm.
regardless of how barbaric it is. Because I mean, to be very explicit, like the residential schools were uh, a program of barbarism and
Of
savagery.
course.
And to argue otherwise I don't, I don't know how. It, well, and yeah, I mean, the idea that somehow that this noble intent, this alleged noble intent, um, mitigates completely the actual disastrous and murderous results is,
Yeah.
to me, is just nuts. I mean, that logic, at that point, how do you make a value judgment on any act of mass violence
Hmm.
undertaken by a state or an institution? I mean,
Yeah. Absolutely.
it makes moral judgment impossible. So that's fun.
Yeah. Very fun topic today. I think we've had a pretty good discussion about it. Unless you have something else you want to add, I think we'll go ahead and cut it here.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think we hit it. Hopefully, Declan catches wind of this and maybe
Maybe,
reflects on himself.
yeah,
He
or
strikes me
like
as the
falls off of something tall and just.
yeah, right. He strikes me as the kind of kid who probably wears a bow tie.
Oh,
You
without a
know,
doubt. Yeah.
you
You know
you
what?
know those
Actually,
types.
let me pull this up off screen. I found a picture where I think he's like actually wearing a bow tie.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn,
He's he's
wouldn't
uh
surprise me.
he's that kind of fucking guy.
Yeah.
Shit, where is this picture? Oh, fucking Bing. God damn it. Bing sucks so bad. Why is it? Oh, I'm accidentally using fucking my browser is.
Oh, Edge,
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah, it
Swinging
sucks.
open his Twitter. Oh, yep. There's a picture of him
Yeah,
in
I just found it. I just
in the
found it and put it
suit.
up. Yep. The white suit with the
Wow.
cigar and the fucking red bow
Yeah.
tie. Yeah.
He's like a right wing version of what's that one guy, Nathan Robinson or whatever, that writes
Yeah.
for Current Affairs. He's
Yeah.
like that, like just a fucking fop, just
Right.
an effete wasp who has shit takes but thinks he's smart and has somehow failed upwards into a position in legacy media. And
Yeah.
that's who
That's
we're
that's
ruled
a
by, folks.
yep. That's actually exactly how I describe him. I just think it's fun. Like, first off, like, if you're gonna try to do the like foppish, like I'm wearing a suit and bow tie thing, could you at least try to do it right? Like look at
Yeah.
those fucking sleeves, just droopy ass fucking wizard sleeves.
Right. Yeah.
The way he's
Get it.
smoking his cigar fucking sucks. It's got a
Get it
stupid.
tailored, dude.
Yeah, right. Like fucking. If you're gonna be that kind of fucking person, own it and fucking do it respectfully.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say that's the difference between him and Nathan Robinson is I usually agree with Nathan Robinson more,
Yeah.
and also Nathan Robinson knows how to like fucking wear his foppish
Yeah.
clothes.
No. He. Yeah. It was more just a. It was
No,
Yeah.
I got
An
exactly what you're saying.
analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and end it here. Thank you for listening. We will be back again some other time with some probably equally. Well, I don't
Yeah.
know if we could.
And
This is
let
like
me just
reaching the
let me
peak of
just
evil.
let me just close with this, okay, folks. Look, if you gotta kill a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand, maybe a couple million people, reverently place them in your mass graves.
Yeah.
Don't just fucking kick the bodies in. Don't make sure they're nice
Yeah.
and snugly in there. Orderly piles.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying.
As long
Orderly
as as
piles
long
of
as the
corpses.
violence is bureaucratized and there's a
Right.
system in place, then it's fine.
Yep. Yeah. Check the boxes. That's it. Check the boxes. Do the forms.
Hi. Michael Deebs here, with no gun pointed at my head. Please know that all content created for the Benzo Rehab Dungeon is and always will be freely available. However, if you would like to support this creation of content, we here at Camp Benzo would appreciate it, as the production itself is not free of cost. Anything donated will go to covering the various subscription fees maintained for content production or improving and expanding the content produced. If you are able to, please head on over to patreon.com/BenzoRehabDungeon. We also have shirts for sale on Teespring, all priced as low as we can get them without turning much or any profit. They are mostly so that you can show your loved ones that a necessary intervention may be on the horizon. Links to the merchandise storefront and our various social media profiles can be found on our link tree, which is the word linktr.ee/BenzoRehabDungeon. As always, we love you. Please take your medicine.